By the time the third freight siren sounded over Caldress, Elias Venn had already burned 2 fingers, insulted a diagnostic computer, and discovered that a cargo hauler from the Orion Spur had somehow managed to fill its coolant lines with something that smelled suspiciously like fermented cabbage. He stood beneath the open belly of the ship with a plasma wrench in one hand and a cable between his teeth, staring up at a maze of conduits illuminated by the pale blue pulse of the reactor core. "You know," he muttered around the cable, "there are easier ways to murder a mechanic." The ship's maintenance intelligence answered through a cracked speaker. "Statement logged as customer feedback." Elias pulled the cable from his mouth and glared at the ceiling. Of course it was. His workshop sat on the lower industrial ring of Caldress, a mining moon wrapped in steel docking towers, cargo bridges, magnetic tram lines, and atmospheric shields that hummed constantly against the poisonous clouds beyond the colony domes. The place was never quiet. Engines screamed overhead, loading drones argued with traffic beacons, and somewhere nearby, somebody was always dropping something expensive. Elias liked it that way. Machines were honest. When they were broken, they usually admitted it by catching fire. People were more complicated. He had just sealed the coolant manifold when the workshop door slid open with a soft chime. Elias expected another pilot carrying a smoking component and an expression suggesting it had definitely been somebody else's fault. Instead, a little girl stood in the doorway. She looked perhaps 9 or 10. Human, almost. Pale skin, dark golden hair tied loosely behind her head, narrow shoulders beneath a simple gray coat, and eyes that moved around the workshop with cautious curiosity. Only her ears revealed that she was not human. They were long and delicately pointed, extending well beyond the line of her hair. She held a small spherical drone against her chest. Elias climbed down from beneath the ship. "If that thing explodes, put it on the red table." The girl blinked. He pointed across the room. "Red table is for exploding things. Green table is for things that might explode. Floor is for things that have already exploded." Her gaze shifted toward a scorched patch beside an overturned tool cabinet. "Experience," Elias explained. The corner of her mouth twitched. That was better. She approached slowly and placed the drone on his workbench. It was an elegant little machine, silver white, with 3 folded stabilizer fins and a cracked optical lens. Elias recognized the design instantly. It was expensive. Not merely expensive in the normal sense, but expensive enough that selling it could probably pay his workshop rent for several months. "Educational model?" he asked. The girl nodded. "What happened?" "It stopped working." "That is the technical term, yes." Another tiny smile. Elias rotated the drone and scanned it with a handheld diagnostic wand. Strange. The internal architecture was far more sophisticated than anything a child normally carried. Quantum memory lattice, adaptive encryption, military-grade shielding around the processor. He glanced at her. She immediately looked away. Interesting. "Did you drop it?" "No." "Throw it?" "No." "Use it to attack someone?" Her eyes widened.
"No."
"Shame. That would have been impressive." She finally laughed, quickly covering her mouth as though laughter itself required permission. Elias noticed that. He said nothing. Instead, he opened the drone's casing and found the problem within minutes. A microscopic stabilizer filament had snapped near the central processor. Easy repair, assuming one possessed a microforge, steady hands, and a complete disregard for manufacturer warranty agreements. Elias possessed all 3. "What does it do?" he asked while fitting a replacement filament.
"It teaches languages, mathematics, history, navigation, etiquette, diplomacy."
"Terrifying." She frowned.
"Why?"
Anything teaching etiquette is obviously dangerous technology. This time her laughter came freely. Elias smiled without looking up. "What's your name?" There was a brief pause.
"Liora."
Elias.
I know.
His hand stopped. She froze. He slowly looked at her. Liora's long ears shifted slightly backward.
Am I famous?
No.
Excellent. I was worried.
She seemed relieved. Elias returned to the drone, though curiosity now scratched at the back of his mind. Children did not normally know the names of mechanics on industrial moons unless they had reason to. He repaired the filament, resealed the casing, and activated the drone. Its lens lit immediately. A pleasant artificial voice announced, "Educational Companion 7 restored, resuming Royal Curriculum sequence." Silence filled the workshop. Liora lunged forward and slapped the power switch. The drone went dark. Elias slowly raised an eyebrow. Royal Curriculum? It says strange things sometimes. Clearly, mine usually insult me. That is because you insult them first. Elias stared at her. Liora smiled innocently. You've been here before. Outside. How many times? She studied the floor. A few. That answer meant many. Elias decided not to press. He handed the drone back. No charge. Her face immediately became serious. I can pay. I'm sure you can. She reached inside her coat. Elias raised a hand. Keep it. Consider it compensation for making my afternoon less boring. She hesitated, clutching the drone. Thank you. Then she left. Elias watched through the front window as she disappeared into the crowded docking corridor. Two tall figures in dark formal coats detached themselves from a nearby pillar and followed her. Elias frowned. The next week, Liora returned with the same drone. It broke again, she announced. Elias turned it on. It worked perfectly. He looked at her. She looked at him. The drone quietly projected a mathematics lesson into the air. Elias folded his arms. Remarkable failure. Liora's ears turned slightly pink. He pretended not to notice. Instead, he pulled out a chair. Tea? She nodded. From that day onward, Liora began appearing every few days. Sometimes she brought something broken. Sometimes she brought something that required extraordinary imagination to describe as broken. Elias repaired whatever she placed before him, and never asked why two silent strangers were always nearby, why station cameras flickered whenever she arrived, or why her coat occasionally contained fabric worth more than his entire tool collection. He simply talked to her, about engines, about stars, about the terrible food served in Dock 7. Liora listened as though these ordinary subjects were treasures. Then one evening, while artificial sunset turned the colony dome amber, she stood beside his workbench holding a small holographic card. Her nervousness was immediately obvious. What did you destroy this time? Elias asked. Nothing. That's disappointing. She extended the card. A tiny constellation appeared above her palm, surrounding glowing words. Birthday invitation. Elias looked from the invitation to Liora. You're inviting me? She nodded. Who else is coming? Her smile faded slightly. No one. Elias waited. Liora looked down at the glowing stars. Just you. For the next 3 days, Elias discovered that repairing a damaged ion regulator was considerably easier than choosing a birthday present for a child he barely understood. He considered buying something from the commercial district, but every shop seemed determined to sell either loud plastic creatures, educational crystals, or toys with enough artificial intelligence to develop emotional problems. One sales drone enthusiastically recommended a miniature tactical fleet simulator designed for children over 8. Elias stared at the holographic battleships firing at one another above the counter and said, Nothing says happy birthday like interplanetary warfare. He left empty-handed. By the time he returned to his workshop, he had decided that buying something expensive would miss the point. Liora never seemed impressed by expensive things anyway. She had once used a rare crystal data stylus to prop open a jammed ventilation panel. So Elias opened the storage cabinet where he kept discarded machine parts and began sorting through old engine fragments, polished bearings, microservos, and memory filaments. Several hours later, a shape slowly emerged beneath his hands. A small mechanical bird with swept metal wings, a narrow silver body, and a tiny projector mounted beneath its chest. It was not perfect. One wing sat a fraction lower than the other, and the first time Elias activated it, the bird launched itself directly into a toolbox. "Graceful," he told it. "You'll fit right in." After recalibrating the balance motors, he loaded a simple star map into the projector. When the bird opened its wings, dozens of tiny constellations spread across the workshop ceiling in white-blue points of light. Elias watched them turn slowly overhead and smiled. That would do. Liora's invitation contained coordinates on the western residential edge of Caldris, far from the industrial docks. Elias expected something large once he reached the district, perhaps the home of a wealthy diplomat or corporate administrator. Instead, the coordinates led him to a modest, two-story residence built against the inner wall of the colony dome. There were no servants outside, no floating vehicles, no guards visible in the street. Only a narrow garden filled with bioluminescent plants and a small silver door. Elias checked the coordinates twice. "Either this is correct," he muttered, "or I'm about to attend a stranger's birthday and create a very memorable legal incident." The door opened before he knocked. Liora stood there wearing a simple, pale dress. Her long, pointed ears were uncovered, and her dark golden hair had been carefully braided. Her face brightened when she saw him. "You came." "You invited me." "I thought you might be busy." "I told a freighter captain his engine could explode without me for one evening." Liora looked alarmed. "It probably won't." "Probably?" "Mechanics survive on optimistic vocabulary." She laughed and stepped aside. The interior surprised him even more. The living room was small, warm, and almost completely undecorated except for a handful of floating lights shaped like stars. A tiny cake sat on a table beside 3 chairs. 3. Elias noticed the number immediately. "Your parents joining us?" Liora hesitated. "My mother might." "Might?" "She works a lot." Elias set the wrapped mechanical bird on the table. "Important job?" "Yes." "What does she do?" Liora's eyes moved toward the window. "Government things." Elias nodded solemnly. "Ah, terrible. I've heard of government." She giggled. There was sadness behind it. Elias did not ask more. Instead, he inspected the cake. It was covered in green icing and decorated with tiny sugar planets. "Did you make this?" "No." "Good. I was preparing a diplomatic lie." Liora stared at him. "The planets are slightly terrifying." She burst into laughter. For the next hour, Elias treated the evening exactly as he would have treated any ordinary birthday. They ate too much cake. He told her about the time he accidentally reprogrammed a sanitation robot during his apprenticeship and spent 6 hours being chased through a cargo station by a machine repeatedly announcing, "Contamination detected." Liora laughed so hard she nearly knocked over her drink. Then she asked him whether he had always wanted to be a mechanic. "No," Elias said. "What did you want to be?" "Rich." She waited. That plan experienced technical difficulties. Her smile remained, but her expression gradually softened. "People talk differently around you," she said. "Usually because they want discounts." "No. You talk like I'm normal." Elias looked at her carefully. "Aren't you?" Liora became very still. For a moment, Elias thought he had accidentally touched something painful. Then she looked down at her hands. "Most people know who I am before they meet me." "Well, I'm famously uninformed." "That's not what I mean." "I know." He leaned back. "Liora, whatever your family does, whatever strange government things your mother handles, none of that matters much to me. You brought me a broken drone. I fixed it. Then you brought me an unbroken drone and lied very badly.
I did not lie badly.
You brought me a functioning machine and said it was broken.
The left stabilizer made a noise.
It breathed.
It was suspicious.
Elias shook his head. Terrible criminal. She smiled again. He handed her the wrapped package. Happy birthday. Liora opened it carefully. When she saw the bird, she stopped moving. Elias suddenly became uncertain. It's homemade, he said. So if it catches fire, technically that's part of the artistic experience. She lifted it in both hands. The mechanical bird unfolded its wings. A field of stars appeared across the ceiling. Liora stared upward. Her eyes glistened.
No one ever made me something before.
Elias frowned. That seems unlikely.
I get gifts. Lots of gifts.
Expensive ones? She nodded. Then clearly your family has been wasting money. Liora laughed weakly, but a tear escaped anyway. Before Elias could say anything, the floor vibrated. The floating lights shook. A deep thunder rolled through the colony dome. Elias looked toward the window. Another vibration followed, stronger this time. Then shadows passed across the glass. Huge spacecraft were descending through the atmosphere. Not cargo ships. Warships. Sleek black and silver vessels moved in formation above the residential district, their engines glowing like miniature suns. Smaller craft separated from the formation and dropped toward the streets below. Elias slowly turned toward Liora. Do birthdays here normally require orbital support? Liora had gone pale. Outside, armored figures were already deploying from the nearest shuttle. Elias pointed toward the window. Friends of yours? Liora swallowed. Then she looked at the door.
My mother is here.
The first knock on the door was so calm that Elias found it more alarming than the arrival of the warships. 3 measured taps, evenly spaced, while outside the windows silver armored figures spread across the street beneath the glow of descending royal craft. Liora stood perfectly still beside the table, clutching the mechanical starbird to her chest. Elias looked from her to the door, then back again. I'm going to guess your mother doesn't work in municipal accounting. Liora's ears lowered slightly.
No.
Tax enforcement?
No.
That's a relief. I was worried this was about my workshop records. Another knock sounded. Elias glanced at the kitchen window. It was too small to escape through without surrendering most of his dignity. Besides, the street beyond was already occupied by enough armed personnel to invade a minor moon. Should I open it? He asked. Liora swallowed.
She'll come in anyway.
Comforting family dynamic. The door slid aside before either of them moved. 2 tall guards entered first, dressed in polished white armor, traced with thin lines of blue light. Their helmets remained folded back, revealing faces with the same long, pointed ears as Liora. Each carried a compact weapon Elias recognized as a gravitic pulse rifle. The kind normally used when asking politely had failed several times. They scanned the room, the cake, the overturned cup, and finally, Elias. Neither looked impressed by him. Elias raised both hands. For the record, the dangerous object is the cake. I've already had 2 slices. Then the woman entered. Elias had seen her face before. Every citizen in the inhabited systems had. Queen Seraphine Vale appeared regularly on diplomatic broadcasts, treaty announcements, emergency transmissions, and commemorative currency. Somehow, none of those images had captured the unsettling gravity of her presence in person. She was tall, elegant, almost entirely human in appearance except for her long ears and the faint silver markings near her temples. Pale blonde hair fell over ceremonial armor shaped from dark metallic plates, each surface alive with subtle circuitry. A narrow crown rested above her brow, not jeweled but forged from a material that seemed to absorb the light around it. For several seconds, Elias simply stared. Then he looked at Liora, then back at Seraphine, then at Liora again. You could have mentioned the crown. Liora winced. Seraphine's gaze shifted toward him. Elias instinctively began to bow.
Elias,
Liora said sharply. He froze halfway down.
you said you wouldn't.
I made that promise before knowing your mother commanded warships. Liora folded her arms. Elias straightened slowly. Fine. No bowing. One of the guards looked scandalized. Seraphine did not. In fact, the smallest movement touched the corner of her mouth.
Leave us,
She said. The guards hesitated.
that was not a suggestion.
They withdrew. The door sealed. Silence settled over the room. Seraphine looked at her daughter first.
You left the palace residence without authorization.
Liora stared at the floor.
You disabled your location beacon. Silence. You bypassed 3 security layers.
Leora's ears lowered further. Elias looked at her.
3?
She whispered,
4.
Seraphine closed her eyes for a moment.
4.
Elias rubbed his jaw.
Honestly, that's impressive.
The Queen looked at him.
Not helping?
No.
Correct.
Liora suddenly spoke.
I wanted one normal birthday.
Seraphine's expression changed. Only slightly. But Elias saw it. The anger was real, yet something deeper sat beneath it. Fear.
You vanished from secure royal quarters. I left a message.
You wrote, I am going out.
I was accurate.
Elias coughed to hide a laugh. Seraphine noticed.
You find this amusing?
Not the security breach. The wording has a certain efficiency. Liora smiled despite herself. The Queen exhaled slowly. Then her gaze fell on the mechanical bird in Liora's hands.
What is that? A gift? From him?
Liora nodded. Seraphine stepped closer. The little bird unfolded its wings automatically and projected a field of stars across the ceiling. Constellations shimmered over the Queen's armor. For the first time, her controlled expression broke.
You made this?
Elias shrugged. From scrap parts. Liora quickly added,
He spent 3 days on it.
Elias looked at her. How do you know that?
I asked people.
What people? Liora became very interested in the bird. Seraphine almost smiled again. Then she turned serious.
Why did my daughter choose you?
Elias was caught off guard.
I don't know.
She has met ambassadors, scholars, military commanders, planetary governors, members of 12 royal houses. Sounds exhausting. She invited none of them. Elias looked at Liora. The girl had gone quiet. I fixed her drone, he said. That cannot be the entire reason. No. I also made fun of it. Seraphine waited. Elias understood the question now. He leaned against the table. I didn't know who she was. The room changed. Seraphine's eyes narrowed.
You truly did not know?
I thought she was the daughter of someone important.
Why?
Her educational drone had military encryption. Liora looked guilty.
And 2 people followed her every time she visited my workshop.
Seraphine went still.
You noticed them.
I'm a mechanic, not blind.
Yet you never questioned her.
She didn't seem interested in being questioned. Seraphine studied him carefully. Elias continued. She wanted to talk about engines, stars, bad cafeteria food. Why would I care what title her mother had? The Queen looked at her daughter. Liora's voice was almost a whisper.
He treats me like me.
That sentence struck harder than any accusation. Seraphine's expression remained composed, but her eyes softened. Then a red light flashed across her wrist. The Queen glanced down. A holographic warning appeared above her gauntlet. Security breach. Royal location compromised. Her face changed instantly. Elias noticed. "So," he said quietly, "I'm guessing that's not the birthday entertainment." Outside, alarms began to scream. The royal guards shouted. A distant explosion shook the windows. Seraphine turned toward the street. Her hand moved toward a weapon concealed beneath her armor. Liora stepped closer to Elias. Another explosion thundered through the district. This time the lights went out. In the darkness, the mechanical starbird remained the only thing glowing, scattering tiny constellations across the walls, while somewhere outside, something heavy began cutting through the royal security perimeter. The emergency lights came alive one by one, staining the room in dim red bands. Elias hated emergency lighting. It made every ordinary problem look like the beginning of a military disaster, and judging from the sounds outside, this time the lighting was unfortunately accurate. A pulse blast struck somewhere beyond the house, followed by a metallic scream and the deep thud of something collapsing into the street. Queen Seraphine crossed the room in 2 strides and touched the side of her gauntlet. A tactical display unfolded around her wrist, but the hologram flickered violently and dissolved into static. "Communications are being jammed," she said. Elias looked toward the dark ceiling. "That seems rude." Seraphine gave him a sharp glance. "This is not the moment." "It is exactly the moment. Later I'll be too busy panicking." Liora was still holding the mechanical starbird, its tiny projector casting pale constellations over her face. She looked frightened now, no longer like a princess hiding from ceremony, but simply a child trapped in a room while armed strangers fought outside. Elias noticed the change immediately. He crouched beside her. "Hey," she looked at him. "Remember the cleaning robot?" Liora blinked. "The one that chased you?" 6 hours. You said 5. I improved the story. A small smile appeared. You lied. Professionally. Another blast shook dust from the ceiling. The smile vanished, but some of the panic went with it. Seraphine watched them for a brief moment, then moved to the wall beside the front door. "The attackers are targeting the royal perimeter. They knew our position." Elias stood. "You think someone followed you here?" "No. The fleet's approach would have been visible from orbit." "Then they reacted quickly." "Too quickly." Her expression hardened. "Which means this was prepared in advance." Elias did not like the sound of that. A burst of gunfire rattled outside. Through the window he saw silver royal guards exchanging blue-white energy pulses with black shapes moving between parked vehicles. The attackers wore adaptive camouflage suits, their outlines bending the light around them. One moment they were visible, the next they dissolved into the street. Seraphine pulled a compact pistol from beneath her armor. "Stay behind me." Elias looked at the weapon, then at the front door. "With respect, Your Majesty, if they breach that entrance, your pistol is going to have a very ambitious evening." She turned toward him. "Do you have a better idea?" Elias looked around the room. His eyes stopped on the wall panel controlling the house systems. "Maybe." He crossed to it and tore the decorative cover free. Seraphine stared.
You are dismantling the residence.
"I improve architecture under pressure."
That panel controls domestic functions.
"Domestic functions run on the same grid as everything else." He pulled out 3 fiber lines and connected them to the small diagnostic tool hanging from his belt. The interface lit immediately. Liora stepped closer.
What are you doing?
Trying to see what the house can still talk to. Lines of code streamed across the screen. Security grid offline. Communications blocked. Exterior sensors corrupted. Then Elias found something else. Interesting. Seraphine moved beside him.
What?
The irrigation system is still active. She stared.
You intend to fight assassins with gardening equipment?
I'm developing the concept. Liora leaned in.
There are pressure lines beneath the entire street.
Elias looked at her. You know the layout?
I studied the residence plans.
Of course you did.
She memorizes everything, Seraphine said.
Liora frowned.
Not everything. You memorized the Imperial Succession Code at 6. It was short.
Elias shook his head. Royal childhood is terrifying. He rerouted the irrigation controls manually. Outside, several attackers moved closer to the house, their camouflage rippling as they crossed the garden. Now, Elias said. Liora touched the control. The ground erupted. Dozens of high-pressure irrigation jets burst from beneath the street, spraying mineral-rich water in every direction. The effect was absurd and immediate. The attackers' camouflage suits failed as reflective droplets coated their armor, turning invisible assassins into dripping silhouettes under the emergency lights. Elias grinned. Behold! Agriculture! Royal Guards opened fire. 2 attackers dropped behind a vehicle. Another slipped on the flooded pavement and crashed into a decorative planter. Liora laughed despite herself. Seraphine stared at Elias. You weaponized the garden. Your gardeners deserve more respect. The advantage lasted only seconds. A dark drone rose above the rooftops. It was small, disc-shaped, and nearly silent. Elias saw its central emitter brighten. Down! He grabbed Liora and pulled her behind the table as a concentrated pulse struck the house. Every window shattered inward. Seraphine threw herself behind the opposite wall. The drone fired again. The front door buckled. Then something heavy slammed against it from outside. Once. Twice. On the third impact, the locking mechanism tore free. Smoke rolled into the room. A black-armored figure stepped through the broken doorway, weapon raised. Seraphine fired first. The pulse hit the attacker's chest, but an energy shield flared and absorbed most of the impact. Of course he has a shield, Elias muttered. The attacker turned toward Liora. That was his mistake. Elias grabbed the nearest object on the floor, the metal cake stand. He threw it. The spinning disc struck the attacker's helmet with a loud clang. The man staggered. Seraphine fired again. This time the shield collapsed. The attacker fell backward through the doorway. Silence followed for half a second. Elias stared at the cake stand lying in the hall. I knew that cake was dangerous. Liora laughed. Even Seraphine's mouth twitched. Then a new sound came through Elias's diagnostic tool. A faint encrypted signal. Repeating. Hidden beneath the jammer. He raised the device slowly. That, he said, is not coming from outside. Seraphine's expression froze. The signal pulsed again. Elias followed the reading. It led directly toward one of the Queen's own security transmitters lying on the floor. Someone inside the royal network had given the attackers their location. Elias lifted the royal transmitter from the floor with 2 fingers, as if it might bite him. The device was no larger than his palm, elegant and seamless, its black surface marked only by a tiny, pulsing symbol near one edge. He had repaired enough security hardware to recognize what he was looking at. The transmitter was not malfunctioning. It had been modified. Someone taught this thing to whisper, he said. Seraphine stepped closer, pistol still in hand.
Explain.
Elias angled his diagnostic tool toward the transmitter. A lattice of code opened above it in pale light. Your communications jammer isn't only blocking signals. This device is sending a narrowband location pulse underneath the interference. Small enough to hide, strong enough for someone nearby to track. Liora stared at the transmitter.
One of ours?
Seraphine's jaw tightened.
Yes.
Outside, pulse fire continued in short, violent bursts, but the royal guards had pushed the attackers away from the garden. For the first time since the assault began, the house was not shaking. The quiet made the discovery worse. Elias looked toward the broken doorway. How many people had access to your security equipment? Seraphine did not answer immediately.
Too many.
That is not a number.
Court security, fleet command, intelligence officers, Communications technicians?
That is a very bad number. She looked at him coldly.
I am aware.
Elias crouched beside the shattered wall panel and connected the transmitter directly to his diagnostic unit. If this thing is broadcasting, it may also be receiving.
Can you trace it?
Probably.
How long?
Elias glanced at the scorched ceiling. Assuming nobody shoots the house again, a few minutes. A blast struck somewhere outside. He sighed. The universe enjoys comedy. Liora sat on the floor beside the table, still holding the starbird. One wing had been scratched during the attack. She ran a finger over it anxiously. Seraphine noticed. Liora, you should move to the shelter compartment.
No.
That was not a request.
I'm staying.
Liora. The girl's long ears angled backward.
If I leave, you'll both start saying things you don't want me to hear.
Elias looked at Seraphine. She's good. Do not encourage her. I'm not. I'm respecting professional talent. Liora almost smiled. Seraphine closed her eyes briefly, then holstered her weapon.
Stay beside Elias.
That is a remarkable downgrade in security, Elias said. Seraphine ignored him. The trace program began to unravel the hidden transmission. Layers of encrypted routing appeared above the diagnostic tool, jumping through municipal relays, orbital repeaters, and emergency beacon channels. Whoever had built the system knew exactly how royal networks were structured. Elias's expression grew serious. This wasn't improvised.
I know.
No, I mean whoever did this expected you to come here. Seraphine looked sharply at him. Elias expanded the signal map. The transmitter started broadcasting before your ships landed. Liora stopped touching the starbird. Seraphine's voice became quiet.
Before?
37 minutes before.
That is impossible.
Machines rarely care about impossibility. She stared at the timestamp. The implications settled between them. Someone had known Liora was inside the house before the Queen herself had arrived. Seraphine turned toward her daughter.
Who knew you were coming here?
Liora looked frightened again, but not because of the attackers.
I didn't tell anyone. Think carefully. I only use the invitation system. What invitation system?
Liora hesitated.
The palace one.
Seraphine went still. Elias looked between them. I'm guessing that wasn't intended for small birthday parties.
It is used for diplomatic functions,
Seraphine said. Liora's voice became smaller.
It makes holographic invitations. It also registers guest identities and event locations with palace administration.
Silence. Elias leaned back. Well, that seems like a design flaw if you're trying to secretly invite mechanics. Liora looked miserable.
I didn't know.
Seraphine's expression softened immediately.
You could not have known.
That change in her voice caught Elias's attention. The Queen, who had entered the house like a military tribunal, was gone for an instant, replaced by a mother who had just realized her daughter blamed herself. Elias turned back to the diagnostic display. I can identify which palace terminal accessed the invitation record. Seraphine stepped closer.
Do it.
He ran the trace. The result appeared almost instantly. Authorized source, Royal Security Directorate. Seraphine's face hardened. A second line appeared. User credential, Commander Varos Tell. Liora whispered.
Uncle Varos?
Seraphine's eyes narrowed. Elias looked at her. Actual uncle? No, honorary title. He has commanded my personal security for 11 years. That seems inconvenient. He carried Liora during her naming ceremony. Liora stared at the floor.
He gives me books every year.
Outside, a royal guard shouted that the perimeter was secure. Seraphine did not react. Betrayal had reached the room more quietly than the attackers had. Elias studied the signal again. Wait. He zoomed in. There was another layer. The transmitter was not only broadcasting location data, it was sending biometric telemetry. Liora's pulse, body temperature, movement. Elias felt the humor drain from him. They weren't tracking the Queen. Seraphine looked at him. They were tracking Liora. The girl went pale. Before Seraphine could speak, the starbird in Liora's hands suddenly activated by itself. Its eyes flashed red. The projected constellations vanished. A new signal poured from its tiny chest projector. Elias stared. No. Liora almost dropped it. What? He grabbed the bird, tore open the side panel, and found a microscopic black wafer attached beneath the projector core. Something he had not installed. A second beacon. Someone had planted it after he built the gift. Seraphine's hand moved toward her pistol again. Elias looked toward the broken doorway. That means whoever did this had access to my workshop. The lights outside flickered. Then every Royal Guard's helmet display shut off at once. A calm voice emerged from the hacked house speakers. Your Majesty. Seraphine froze. Commander Varos Tell continued. Please surrender the princess, and no one else needs to die. Seraphine did not answer Commander Varos immediately. She stood in the ruined living room with one hand resting near her weapon, her face so still that Elias could almost imagine the Queen had become another piece of palace machinery. The hacked speakers crackled. Your Majesty, Varos repeated, I strongly advise against making this difficult. Elias looked at the shattered windows, the scorched walls, the broken door, and the remains of a birthday cake that had somehow survived more punishment than several armored men. I think we may have passed the difficult stage. Liora gave him a nervous glance. Seraphine did not smile. Why? She asked instead. The speaker remained silent for several seconds. Then Varos answered. Because the Dominion cannot survive another weak ruler. Liora flinched. Seraphine's expression changed almost imperceptibly. You mean my daughter? I mean the future. You have spent years shaping policy around sentiment, peace agreements, civilian protections, trade concessions to frontier worlds. And now your heir disappears from secure quarters to celebrate with a mechanic. Elias frowned. I feel unfairly influential. Varos continued as if he had not heard him. The royal houses are losing confidence. Liora will inherit your softness. Seraphine's voice became colder. So you intended to abduct a child and call it patriotism? I intended to prevent collapse. Elias leaned toward the nearest speaker. People who say that usually have very impressive uniforms and terrible plans. A pulse struck the exterior wall. Dust spilled from the ceiling. Elias, Seraphine warned. Right. Less commentary. He crouched beside the open starbird and pulled the hidden beacon free. The wafer was tiny, but its quantum handshake matched the signal architecture in the royal transmitter. Same maker, same encryption family, same arrogance. Liora moved closer. Can we use it? Elias looked at her. To find him? He stared for half a second, then smiled. There you are. Seraphine turned. Absolutely not. Your daughter has a point. She is 9. She is also the only person here who immediately asked the useful question. Liora tried not to look pleased. Elias connected the beacon to his diagnostic tool. If Varos is controlling these devices remotely, they need a return channel. He can hide the signal source, but he cannot hide latency. Seraphine understood. You can estimate distance and direction if I have enough receivers. Our network is disabled. Your network is. He pointed toward Liora's educational drone lying beneath the table. Her homework machine is not. Liora picked it up. The drone activated. Educational Companion 7 ready. Elias opened its system architecture and whistled softly. This thing has orbital navigation sensors. It teaches astronomy. It could also guide a missile. Liora looked horrified, hypothetically.
That word does not help, Seraphine said.
Elias linked the drone to the beacon. Data began scrolling. 3 signals. One from the ruined Royal transmitter, one from the Starbird beacon, and one repeating command pulse moving through the district. He watched the timing differences.
Varos isn't in orbit.
Seraphine stepped beside him.
Where?
Close.
How close?
Elias enlarged a map. A blinking point appeared beneath the residential district. Liora stared.
The transit tunnels.
Seraphine's eyes narrowed.
There is an abandoned mag-rail station beneath this sector. Apparently not abandoned enough.
A heavy impact shook the street. Varos spoke again. Last warning. Seraphine walked to the broken doorway.
No.
The answer was quiet. Absolute. The speakers clicked off. Almost immediately, dozens of small drones rose above the rooftops. Elias looked outside. That seems like disagreement. The machines descended in formation, black discs with glowing emitters beneath them. Royal Guards opened fire, but several drones projected shield fields, creating a moving corridor through the street.
They're coming for the house,
Seraphine said. Elias studied the old infrastructure map. No. She looked at him.
They're making us think they are.
The drones were noisy, visible, dramatic. A distraction. Elias pointed downward.
Varos is coming through the tunnels.
Seraphine contacted the surviving guards through a short-range channel. Seal the lower access. A response came back. Too late, Majesty. Breach below us. Metal groaned beneath the floor. Liora's eyes widened. Then Elias heard it. A magnetic cutting charge. Move! They ran into the side corridor just as the floor erupted. A circular section of the room rose violently, flipping the table and launching what remained of the birthday cake into the wall. Black-armored soldiers climbed through the opening. Elias stared at the green icing dripping down the plaster. All right, he said. Now I'm angry. Seraphine fired. Her first pulse struck the lead soldier's shield and threw him backward into the tunnel. Liora ducked behind the reinforced kitchen partition, while Elias grabbed a maintenance conduit from the wall and overloaded its magnetic regulator. The conduit began to hum. Seraphine glanced at him.
What are you doing?
Bad engineering.
That is not reassuring.
It shouldn't be. He threw the regulator into the breach. The magnetic field detonated sideways. Every metal weapon in the tunnel ripped violently toward the floor and walls. Soldiers stumbled as rifles flew from their hands and armor joints locked against exposed support beams. Elias grinned. Physics. Seraphine shot the nearest attacker's shield emitter. Useful. High praise. The royal guards stormed through the front entrance and secured the room. Then Liora called out.
Elias!
He turned. Her educational drone had projected a new map, a moving signal. Varos was retreating.
He knows we found him,
Liora said. Elias checked the route. The signal was heading toward the underground shuttle vault beneath the old station. Seraphine's expression hardened.
If he reaches a stealth craft, he disappears.
Elias looked at the wrecked house, then at the tunnel opening, then at Liora. Your birthday is becoming complicated. She nodded seriously.
It usually has musicians.
That sounds safer. Seraphine drew a second pistol from one of the fallen soldiers and handed it to Elias. He looked at it. I repair engines.
Tonight you improvise.
Apparently that's my official title. They descended into the tunnel together, Liora protected between two royal guards while her drone guided them through the abandoned mag rail system. Old blue emergency lights flickered over rusted rails. Far ahead, an engine began powering up. Varos was almost at the shuttle. They reached the vault just as the stealth craft lifted from its platform. Elias saw the exposed service conduits running beneath it. He smiled. Oh, that is badly designed. Seraphine glanced at him.
You have an idea?
No. He pulled a plasma wrench from his belt. I have tools. He sprinted toward the control pillar, tore open the emergency panel, and crossed two magnetic launch circuits. The shuttle rose another meter. Then every docking clamp activated at once. The craft slammed back onto the platform with a thunderous crash. Inside the cockpit, Varos stumbled against the canopy. Elias looked up. Happy birthday. Royal guards surrounded the shuttle. Varos emerged slowly, weaponless now, his long silver hair disordered, his face filled with disbelief. Seraphine approached him.
You betrayed my daughter.
Varos stared at Liora. I tried to save the Dominion. Liora stepped forward before anyone could stop her.
No,
she said. Her voice was small but steady.
You tried to make everyone afraid.
Varos looked away. The guards took him. As silence returned to the station, Seraphine looked at Elias.
You saved her.
He shook his head. We all did. Liora held up the damaged starboard.
Can you fix this too?
Elias examined the scratched wing.
Liora, after tonight, this is the easiest problem I've seen. For the first time since the attack began, Seraphine laughed.
3 months after the birthday attack, Elias discovered that royal palaces had exactly the same problems as repair workshops, except the ceilings were higher, and everyone pretended the problems were intentional. He stood beneath an open service panel in the western wing of Queen Seraphine's palace, staring into a knot of gravitic conduits while two nervous technicians waited behind him. Who designed this? He asked. One technician cleared his throat. The Imperial Architectural Bureau. Elias looked over his shoulder. Do they hate electricity? Neither man answered. Elias sighed and returned to the panel. His new title, Royal Engineering Consultant, had sounded impressive when Seraphine first offered it. In practice, it meant fixing systems that thousands of highly educated people had been afraid to criticize. Strangely, Elias liked that. He had changed more than he expected after Caldris. Before Liora, he had been content to live between broken engines and docking schedules, avoiding responsibilities that involved anything more complicated than machinery. Now he found himself attending security reviews, arguing with admirals, redesigning palace networks, and occasionally explaining to senior ministers why installing 12 redundant biometric locks on a bathroom door was not evidence of strong governance. Commander Varos had been tried publicly. The investigation that followed uncovered a network of hardline officials, private military contractors, and nobles who had helped him exploit the palace invitation system and royal security channels. Several arrests followed. More importantly, Seraphine ordered the entire protective structure around Liora rebuilt. No more secret trackers hidden in personal objects. No more adults pretending surveillance was the same thing as care. Liora had changed too. She now attended a small academy inside the Capitol Dome, with children selected not by rank, but by whether she actually liked them. The first week had apparently produced 2 arguments, one broken classroom drone, and a friendship with a girl who had informed Liora that princesses were not automatically good at sports. Elias considered that excellent progress. The palace garden was already glowing when he arrived for Liora's next birthday. Artificial auroras rippled beneath the transparent dome overhead, shifting softly across the evening sky while silver-leafed trees opened their luminous blossoms. This time there were children everywhere. Real children. Running, laughing, ignoring protocol. One boy had somehow climbed onto the decorative base of a royal statue and was using the emperor's bronze shoulder as a launch platform for a toy glider. Elias watched approvingly. Civilization was healing. Liora saw him from across the garden. "Elias!" She ran toward him, long ears visible beneath her braided golden hair. Behind her came 3 other children carrying floating lanterns. Liora stopped in front of him. "You're late." "I'm 2 minutes early." "That's almost late." "You've become demanding." "I'm royal." "There it is." She grinned. Elias held out a small package. Her eyes widened. "You made something?" "Possibly." Seraphine approached before Liora could open it. The queen wore no ceremonial armor tonight, only a simple dark blue dress with silver threading along the sleeves. Her pale blonde hair fell freely over her shoulders, and the thin crown on her head looked almost optional. "You promised not to give her anything capable of flight indoors," Seraphine said. That promise contained technical ambiguities. Elias noticed her expression. "That face means you've already received a complaint." 3. Efficient government. Seraphine smiled. It had become easier for her to do that. Their relationship had changed after Coldris as well. Seraphine no longer spoke to him like an outsider standing dangerously close to the throne. She trusted him, not blindly but honestly. When he disagreed with her, she listened. When she became overly protective of Liora, he reminded her. When he became too casual around visiting diplomats, she reminded him that telling an ambassador his starship looked emotionally unstable was not diplomacy. Neither had corrected the other completely. That seemed healthy. Liora opened the package. Inside rested the repaired mechanical starbird. But it was different now. Its metal wings had been polished. The damaged projector had been replaced, and a small new crystal sat within its chest. Liora touched it. The bird unfolded. Thousands of stars filled the garden. Children stopped running. The holographic projection expanded overhead into a complete 3-dimensional map of nearby systems. One constellation brightened. Coldris. Then another light appeared beside it. The capital. A silver line connected them. Liora stared upward. "What does it mean?" Elias folded his arms. "Places matter because of what happens there." The projection changed. Tiny images appeared among the stars, the old workshop, the birthday house, the palace garden. "And people?" "They're worse." Liora laughed. Elias smiled. "They connect everything." Seraphine watched the constellation silently. Then Liora looked at Elias. "Did you know I was a princess when we first met?" "No." "Not even a little?" "I knew something was strange." "What?" "Your drone cost more than my workshop." Liora's eyes widened. "You knew that?" "I considered stealing it." Seraphine raised an eyebrow. "Joke." "Poorly timed." "Those are my best kind." Liora laughed so loudly that several children turned toward her. Then the garden lights dimmed. A ceremonial announcement began to play from hidden speakers. Liora groaned. "No speeches." Seraphine looked toward the control platform. "I cancelled the speeches," the announcement continued. Elias pointed toward a group of royal officials. "They appear to disagree." Seraphine calmly lifted her wrist communicator. The speakers went silent. The children cheered. Elias stared at her. "You hacked your own ceremony." "I learned from professionals." Liora looked between them. "This is the best birthday." There was no fleet descending this time. No assassins. No hidden transmitters. No frightened child waiting beside 3 empty chairs. Only music, glowing trees, children arguing over cake, and a queen who had finally learned that protecting her daughter did not mean controlling every moment of her life. Later, when the celebration ended, Elias walked alone toward the palace transit platform. Liora caught up with him near the doors. "Elias?" He turned. She hugged him. It surprised him enough that he forgot whatever sarcastic answer he had been preparing.
"Thank you,"
she whispered. For what?
"for coming the first time."
Elias looked back toward the garden. Seraphine stood beneath the artificial stars, watching them. He finally understood that the invitation had changed all three of them. A lonely princess had found friendship. A queen had learned to loosen her grip. And a mechanic who once believed machines were easier than people had somehow discovered that complicated people were worth repairing nothing for, fixing nothing for, simply staying for. He rested a hand gently on Liora's head. "Next year," he said, "I'm buying the gift." She pulled back.
"No.
Why?
Homemade is better."
Elias sighed. Fine. The transit doors opened. Behind them, the starbird crossed the garden sky, projecting constellations over the palace dome. For once, nothing was broken. Elias almost found that suspicious.